Hello, everyone, and welcome to our BI Livecast series. I'm Carrie Keenan, one of the program directors here at Brand Innovators. I want to welcome everyone to our Marketing Innovation Livecast. Today is really going to be special, and I'm thrilled to kick our event off for you. We've got a phenomenal agenda with an awesome lineup of marketers. Before we get started, though, I do want to thank all the marketers, sponsors, and of course you in the audience for helping make our event even possible. Throughout the day, excuse me, you'll be able to use the Q&A widget and a chat widget down at the bottom of your screen. And we encourage you to use those to engage with our speakers and the other attendees using the widgets throughout the program. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jeff Haynes, the brand manager, innovation, brand strategy, and insight for Cox Communications, and their moderator, Casey Saran, the CEO of Spaceback. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you for having us.
Okay, I'm gonna let you two take it away, and I'll see you in a little bit.
Right on. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. I'm Casey Saran. I'm going to be talking to Jeff today. But I just want to let everyone know I actually just got married on July 8th. So I've been out of office until about 40 minutes ago for the past month. So for anyone who does moderating events, it's a great way to ramp back into things to start out by doing an event. So yeah, I'm very excited about this. Jeff, why don't you start out by quickly introducing yourself?
Sure. So first of all, as we are used to, well, congratulations, first of all. And then second, want to do the virtual bingo, make sure you can hear me and see me clearly. Everything is good before I start talking to myself. Thank you very much. So yeah, my name is Jeff Haynes. I work at Cox Communications under the Cox Enterprises umbrella. And what that means is we're focused on really our internet product, our TV product. So think about consumer brands on my side of the house. But internet's our main product. I'd work on front-end innovation, which for you, those of you who don't know, there's really two types of innovation. There's top funnel, very front-end, which is hypersensitive to what the customer needs are. And then downstream, which is more the execution and taking those new ideas that I come up with and then developing them to the market.
I'm sorry. Now my turn to do the check. We'll talk a lot more about that. Before we do you have any advice for? I know you're married. How long have you been married?
Oh, 7 years and two little beautiful girls. I'm a girl dad for sure. Proud.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you have any marriage advice for me getting through the pandemic, being doing a full-time job with a big team behind you?
I would say, nothing groundbreaking. Going actually along the theme of what I'll talk about later is kind of sticking to the basics. Communication is key, of course. I think everybody knows that, but just like everybody knows that, doing it is much harder. So you know a lot of things, but doing them is different. What I mean by that is like if with expectations with work, work gets crazy sometimes. We're working more than ever, which is great, and it's wonderful to have supportive spouses, but I find that's extra critical now with working from home, just to be open with my communication and say, hey, I really need to work till this time tonight. Like I really need to do this in the morning, wake up early, or if I need to log on in the weekend, because I often keep it in my head. So I would say definitely communicate. I know we're all busy, and just make sure you're on the same page with kind of your what you need to do and what's on your mind. Another thing is maybe a personal preference. We're a hugging family, and so I was raised as a hugging family, and so literally every time I leave or my wife leaves, we hug and say I love you. So it sounds corny, but like it's just one of those things we just do. And same thing with my girls, even though one is 6 and is growingly less likely to give me a kiss without me grabbing her and chasing her, but still I recommend that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think we'll keep that in mind. Katie, my partner, is an 8th grade teacher. So throughout the pandemic, we were one thin wall away. She had 30 15-year-olds on her Zoom, and I'm here doing ad tech stuff. But it was so nice to be able to like come meet in the middle after like a long day of talking about just such different stuff. And yeah, just sure. Seeing like how each other's day was. I don't know how people do it where they work in the same industry as their spouse. We do such different things that it's like we can talk about what we're doing, but we're not really so involved that it feels kind of easier to support each other, being like a little step removed.
Agreed. And I think one no, I didn't say this, but if you do have a spouse that you work with from home along with, I find it's really helpful to carve out 15 to 30 minutes for lunch. So, I do see now a trend where people are scheduling lunch meetings remotely without, providing lunch. And so it's easy to get into that, where it's like, sometimes you need to just meet with lunch, but if you can, it was really helpful for us both to prioritize eating lunch together, even if it's 15, 20 minutes. Just to have that break in the day, because you just don't want it to be such a cat and mouse chase where you're just constantly working and trying to fit in your spouse and what's really important.
Was your spouse working from home as well?
Yes, that was a fun time where she was working. She was on COVID relief for a large corporation. And so especially when COVID first hit, she was working 12, 14 hours a day because she was doing COVID relief, helping basically get their retail stores the support they needed when they had positive cases. And so we had, of course, 2 little girls we're trying to deal with. I had have a very demanding job. So that was very, very stressful time.
Yep. Yeah. We joke around that we've been together for about 5 years now, but that our pandemic years count for triple.
That's so right.
So when people ask how long we've been together, we padded a little bit because of that.
Yeah, I definitely noticed a little more gray coming in on my beard from those couple years. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And we haven't talked about this yet, but I will hit you up offline. My side hustle is I run a beard oil company.
Perfect. Okay.
So yeah, I'll get you some product.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, real quick for everyone here, I'm Casey Sarin, CEO of Spaceback. Our company turns social media posts into display ads, and we've grown a lot since the pandemic. So we're totally remote. And we've been hiring people wherever we can find great people. Everyone's part of everyone's onboarding package is an Oculus, and we've been doing like meetings in the metaverse and stuff, just to make sure as a small remote team we have the tools to at least invest in the future of remote learning and co-working. They're very far from being, I'd say, productive for us, but I'm telling you all this because I think scheduling time throughout the day to talk to Katie and have some time is especially because we're working across so many different time zones. What time is lunch? Like, it's not 12 to 1 for a lot of our team where people are. So I'm normally inspired by work stuff on these sessions, but I am inspired to make sure we are having standing time. So yeah, because it's just so easy to get scheduled throughout the day.
That's great.
Cool, Jeff. So I think one of the themes I wanted to dive into most, and maybe learning more about your org and the role here, you talk about kind of this upfront planning or the front end and the back end. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. Yeah. So they're quite different skill sets. So front end innovation, let's say, is a buzzword right now. It's like strategy was 5 years ago. Everybody used the word strategy. They just threw it out there to the point where it didn't mean anything. I think we've gotten to that point with innovation where so many people just kind of use that buzzword and we're being innovative, but what does that really mean? And so, I think it's easy to break it up into 2 groups. So you have front end innovation, top funnel. So if you think of marketing terms, top funnel, where you're broadening that funnel, how you're approaching the market and identifying opportunities. And then you have the downstream or bottom of the funnel, which is where, again, I said this earlier, you're taking those new products, the product ideas, and developing them, go-to-market strategies, and kind of pushing it out there to be experienced. So I work, again, on the front end side of it, which really, it means that I get to be an advocate of the customer. Like, I live and breathe the customer. I am from even going back to my previous couple jobs. It was my last job, I worked with low-income consumers, and they don't get a lot of opportunities in this world, and I learned with that job how to be really empathetic and how to understand how to put that customer first, because again, it's not who you are or who your executive team is, it's who your customer is. And if you're an executive making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, you have to make that intentional switch in your head and your thinking to think like a consumer who may be making 15, 20,000 with a kid or 2, single family home. And so what I do is I'm that champion of that customer. I work directly with the insights teams. And what we do is we use primary syndicated research. We identify kind of what the state of the customer is, what the state of the from macro or micro level. and we spend a lot of time reading, a lot of time listening, and going through that research to distill it to understand some opportunities. And so, like, you have all this research, innovation, again, funnel, picture the funnel, and you're breaking those down into different opportunities and what we call hunt areas, and whether that is a dig site basically, and it's where you keep digging into. So, okay, here's a nugget that I'm really latching onto with this insights that is a pain point that our customers are having with our service or in general internet service. Here is what we need to solve. Here's how then I define what that problem is through a very particular problem statement that's very intentional. So super crisp and problem statement, because trash in, trash out. So if I don't have a very clear problem I'm trying to solve, what I do is I then take that, build stimulus around it to go into an ideation, which, it could be as simple as advanced brainstorming session with your team. If you don't have a lot of resources, there's certain ways to kind of frame your perspectives to then build stimulus to say, okay, if I show you this, what does it make you think of? Capture those ideas. Or from with my company, we like to do a little bit more larger scale ideations where we bring in externals who are subject matter experts. So like we worked on a privacy and security innovation recently, and we reached out to the FBI. I reached out to some Harvard professors and just tried to understand, like, what is coming down the stream that our customers, our 6 million customers, would have a possible pain point or something down the road that we need to solve for. And then once we have those potential, say, 100 ideas, I start going through them all with business partners and very, very cross-functional efforts. I cannot work without all of the product teams, technology teams, marketing teams, finance teams, and we call them discovery sessions. So basically, I'm working with those different teams to say, okay, here are some ideas, like, what do you think? And I start doing what we call pre-feasibility and start building out those ideas. By the end of, say, 3-4 weeks or whatever time we need, we end up having, say, 20 ideas that we then further develop and test with consumers. So I know that was a long-winded answer to say kind of a lot, but I think it's important to kind of build that story and picture to try to help kind of quantify, so to speak, what innovation really is, and especially front-end innovation with what I do. And I should also clarify, it doesn't have to be a new product or service. I work a lot with the marketing team, the direct marketing team, direct go-to-market team, the communications team, to identify certain products and services we already have and how we can upgrade and expand on the value proposition. So it works with everything. This is not just new products. This is for just general comms teams too.
Yep. And when it comes to kind of, you talk about the first step is really having a well-defined problem. Are you starting with, issues or hypotheses that, there might be, some leakage here, and like we need to get in and or where do you start identifying where you even need to begin that process?
That's a great question. I'm telling you, that is a really good point. Going back to the privacy and security work stream I just told you about, and I got to be careful. The reason I'm looking up, I'm like thinking, what can I say? What can I not say? But I think a good example of what you just asked.
My job's to try to get you to say as much as possible.
Yeah, because I can't see who's watching. So no, it's really no surprise of what consumers want with privacy and security in their digital world. It's really understanding what our place in it, like what is Cox Communication or Telecom's place in it. And so to go back to your question, we did have several hypotheses, and typically we try and have 3, no more than 3, because then it gets a little bit like we need to refine it a little more, but no less than 3, because then you also need to be more expansive and think more creatively to solve the problems. So our kind of magic number is to try and have 3, what we call hunt statements, which are, how might we solve this? How might we do this? Those are our hypotheses, which is hard to say fast, I just realized. And so what we did is we had those 3 hypotheses. What I mentioned earlier about talking about or having pre-feasibility conversations with internal, external partners, those help you refine those individual hunt statements. So those 3 hunt statements went from one iteration to like 3 or 4 different steps. And then what's really important is that we were wrong on 2 of the 3 hypotheses. We realized that we do have a very secure network. We do have a lot of things we're doing, which we can improve on, don't get me wrong, but that's not necessarily what our objective was. And so we spent about 2 months on this project, and we said, you know what, 1 out of the 3 hunt statements is something that we want to pursue. Let's dig in a little bit more. Let's loop back around, start building that hunt statement again, and building that one out to 3 so that we can take that in ideation. So it's really iterative. It's really about being able to suck it up and say, hey, I was wrong, like this is fine. And actually sometimes it's rewarding to say you're wrong, and it feels good to say you're wrong. And we present to the executives and get approval to then go back and kind of get additional funding for bringing it back. They're appreciative of that, because it doesn't happen all the time, but it's just showing that we're doing our job right.
Totally. And this is so I mean, kind of peeling back the layers of the onion here. We're talking about the front end of the front end,
Right.
with the hunt statements and how you go about defining the problem. As you're iterating on the problem, what are some of the organizational concerns or challenges or communication on? I'm sure there's a lot of different stakeholders who have a lot of different opinions on where the problems are. How do you work like internally to talk about problems in a way that are collaborative with other teams instead of or seen as helpful, instead of seen as a threat or criticism?
That's great point. I can't do my job without doing that aspect well, because I like to call my position and my role, which is very unique, because I do specialize in such a top funnel of the top funnel, really, that I like to call myself the connective tissue within the organization. So it's my job not to only push through initiatives that are active, but also understand what we've done in the past. Because the more I understand about history, which you can apply that to pretty much current state of anything, the more I understand about what we've tried before, the more it helps me be empathetic and be armed, so to speak, to talk to cross-functional members. And in our company, we have a lot of tenure. It's a great company, treats us very well, just incredible company to work for. So a lot of people don't leave, which is great in a way that I get to hear different perspectives of what we tried before. So then kind of going back directly to what you asked, there are so many ideas that we have that somebody I've talked to afterwards has said, we've done that. We did that 3 years ago. We did that 4 years ago. It failed. We could not get funding for it. And my job then is to build the case as if I'm pitching on Shark Tank again. So it's my job then to say, well, okay, I understand that didn't succeed back then. Why did that not succeed? Like, can you give me some input? And then start to peel back the onion, like you said. But also from a different angle, like I kind of bifurcate that from like, what did they feel that could have been done better? But then also second path is like, what makes today 2022 different than 2017, 2018, because the consumer is always changing. And if you're thinking about something's not going to work now because it didn't work 3-4 years ago, you might be thinking more about the technology and about internal operations and not about what the customer wants. So again, that brings back kind of full circle of why I always need to think about the customer first, why I always need to wear that customer hat. And again, I should say that customer is not the same. I may have 10 hats on my wall, because it depends on which, like we have affordability customers who are lower income. We have middle-class millennials is what we call them. Like we have just different segmentation and personas of different people. So based on what we're trying to solve for, I put that hat on. And so again, I just kind of sell that in. I find out why. A lot of it is capital. It's just we don't have money for it. And so then if that's the case, then it's up to me to then continue developing those ideas, put them back in front of customers. So yes, so top funnel, I'm getting insights and I'm building the case. Once I come up with ideas, I develop what we call a concept that connects our solution to their problem, and then we test it back with the customer. That helps us understand like what that impact would be. Like would they buy that? Would they be interested in it? Do they think it's unique? And then I can start to do back of the napkin modeling to say, okay, based on our 6 million customers, this is the segment that this would appeal to. Based on that, here's our incremental purchase intent, because we do pre and post testing for the concepts. And that helps me say, okay, yes, we couldn't afford it then, but now we're talking about a $15 million incremental revenue boost this year or next year. And this is why it's important now. So it's, no single case is the same. Like there's always something different. I always need to make sure I have my tool belt on when I'm talking to different people and know which team I'm going into to talk to first.
Yep. No, and this is really interesting. I feel like we're learning a lot about. I guess my question is, where does the innovation come in? We're talking about problems and internal work, but in terms of like, or is this process part of the innovation? But where do you see as the part where innovation is most active?
Yep, I think this is key. Like you can't innovate without that top of the funnel front end, that some people call it fuzzy front end, because you're just still trying to identify what that problem is. So it's critical to have this step. It's just very difficult because again, you have to work cross-functional at all times. I cannot do my job without other teams, like I mentioned. So with that, it's key to have leadership who buys into it and not just says like, hey, we need to have an innovation manager just because it's popular or just because I want to check that box, because it's not going to work if that's the case. You have to have a mentality to say, this is how we want to improve. This is our market share, but we have these opportunities, and that's again my job. And I can go back and use some examples if you want, and just kind of talk about how we kind of step down to that approach. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, sorry, my fault for not asking a very clear question. I think what I mean is, after your team has a clearly defined, problem statement, and you've gone through, some work in terms of, what should that solution, be, or what are you going to do about that problem? What's the kind of, pass off to engineers actually, building something or sending RFPs to vendors who could help, but,
Gotcha.
when does, the problem turn into how you're addressing the problem?
Okay, understood. So that really is how we do the handoff, is what we call it. And so there's a middle area, a gray area at the business case modeling. And so the top funnel is about, building the idea, developing the concept, as you may hear people talk about concept, which is, again, how does it work? Like, what is the insight you're solving? What is the benefit to the customer? What are the reasons to believe of why that would work? And then once you do the insights work and you get kind of that sizing that you can do, you start to do the back of the napkin modeling, and you say, okay, is this worth it? And then we have, it's a gate at that point. So we call it gatekeeping. So we will have, we'll meet with the executive sponsor and just say, okay, here's what we've identified. And just build that case, again, like Shark Tank, like build the case, like this is something we need to pursue or not pursue, shift our resources elsewhere. If they agree it's somewhere or something that we should pursue, we start then the process of handing off. And what that process looks like is downstream takes it, and then we all kind of work together with biz ops to then start looking at assumptions. And what that does is that helps you start really thinking about different assumptions that the customer would make, that we make as a business, that some of the developmental costs, and we understand what we're really against. And that's when the downstream team starts to solve those problems, but only after it's gone through that gate and has that approval from the executives. Because like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, is if we don't have that support, everybody has so much going on, and so all of a sudden they're like, oh gosh, a new idea, like here's a new product we have to develop, like we're still trying to get this one out from 2 years ago, and so you have to have that executive support, because they're the ones who allocate the resources and really make it and kind of cascade down that this is an important initiative, we need to support it, and that kind of aligns everybody. And then once that the downstream takes it in, they start including the marketing team, let's say traditional marketing, because I sit on the marketing team, but traditional marketing, who builds the go-to-market strategies, the fully developed, which markets if we're going to test in, if we're going to test and learn it. They start working directly with the technology teams to start building it or seeing if it's something we need to acquire. And then it kind of snowballs and builds. But I will say one important step is I'm very involved from the entire process in terms of like the front end, I help lead, but the bottom downstream, I'm still a player at the table, because it's important for me and my team to hear the discussions, because it's really easy when the rubber hits the road to start peeling back some of that value that we developed in the top end. And because, they're hurdles basically. And so the more hurdles you have, the harder it is, of course. If you start taking away one hurdle to make it easier for you to go to market and develop, well, how do you know that one thing you just took out isn't a key piece that the customer responded to in the insights? If you take that out, we go to market, all of a sudden it crashes and burns, doesn't do anything. Well, that's because you took out the key value that we added. And so again, it's very important to be included with all those conversations to remind people like, hey, don't take that part away. No.
Yep. So it sounds like a handoff, or a handoff in the sense of like, passing the baton isn't really right here, right? Or it's not like, you're giving it to them, they run with it, and you go, find another problem to focus on. It sounds like there is collaboration in that process. What's the right analogy for that handoff?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, because usually as a baton, like you feel like baton, but you're right. It's almost like a coach in the ear. So it's like I'm the first.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah. So I'm the first relay. I pass the baton, and then I immediately go to the sideline, put the earpiece in, and start talking and just listening and making sure that they're doing the right thing. And they do the same. So I want to also to add that, downstream, we have a lot of partners downstream that are just key and really incredible talents that go along with my journey to then add value to say, hey, here's some key aspects that BizOps looks for. Like, let's just think about that early. And so again, I do my job with the help of them. They do their job with the help of me. And so it's really fun. It's challenging. It's, if you can't deal with ambiguous kind of work, then it's not for you, but it's super rewarding. And especially when you get to see something tangible or see something go to market in a value prop or a rebrand, it's really empowering and makes you feel like you're doing something in this world.
Yep. No, and it's so fun talking to you because I'm a product manager by background. So I think about things as, a product development process, and a lot of things are very similar with, the needs assessment and,
Yes.
But it sounds like your process is it's, an organizational process as well as a product development process. And it's clear from talking to you that you have a really, you have a clear picture in your mind of, what these steps are. And you almost talk about it as it's like, and then this happens and this goes to this. And it's pretty, it sounds like it's a process that you're able to repeat. It's not like each problem you're tackling with a new toolkit. Is this process one that you've developed internally? Have you studied this and you're applying processes you've learned elsewhere, or how did it all come together?
Yes. And so, I've helped with, especially with the front end, is take some of the classic design, like you said, product management, classic design thinking for agile development, and taking those and kind of molded them to how we need to operate. And so I'm getting a 2-year Harvard graduate certificate in innovation. And one of the classes, there's 4 classes I have to take. One of them is design thinking. And so it's about nitty gritty, like not having resources like a big, multi-billion-dollar corporation, and just doing the work yourself and understanding. And so I learned a lot with that training to help take it back to how we do. And I would say it's very much like the top funnel. So it's about building empathy, first of all. It's about having an insights team or Googling, just being inquisitive and what we call them discoverers and explorers, doing that part, which is step 1 of design thinking. So we've kept that. Defining the problem. Again, we talked about that earlier, super key. That's the second step. Ideation is third step. That's what I do. That's where it starts to change a little bit for us. That's where we start doing concept validation and biz ops work. And so again, to your point, not to get into the weeds of what those are, but I did do extensive work in taking like the classic design thinking steps and translating those to how we operate as a huge company that wasn't really built for it necessarily. And we do have other groups, like we have a new growth and development team, and with great people that I talk to regularly, that they're focused on like adjacent and like new blue ocean, like something that will be completely different, and maybe acquisition or developing new products and services that have nothing to do with what we do. And mine is more the core. And so again, that helps me then be super focused on who we are as a company and make sure that I'm fitting new pieces into the existing puzzle.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like in this case, a successful execution, results in happier customers and more revenue and all those, KPIs that we love to track and talk about all the time. What does successful process look like? Not the execution, but can you have a successful process that doesn't result in a successful execution?
Yes, good point. Yes, I will say, to be open, I had that was one of the struggles I had when I first started this job. Was my job, the KPIs are less about the end result in the market, because it could be 2, 3, 4 years out. And so to your point, I had to work very hard with my boss to develop kind of KPIs that were relevant to my role. And so it's really about how far we get with a certain project within the stage gates. It's how successful, talking to different owners within the company, project owners, of how successful, say, an ideation that I helped facilitate or I helped lead. Like, how did you feel about that? How, it's very soft. It's like it's full of 360s, and talking again soft skills of how I'm working and making sure that I'm not building the airplane while I'm trying to fly it, so to speak, meaning that I'm pushing people to remind them, like, here's a good step in the process, and being that grounding kind of force. I will say we do have some lagging indicators that we use for KPIs that's about the customer relationship. So not NPS necessarily, but it's really about satisfaction is one of our big drivers. We have a full model like pricing and satisfaction. So we've done extensive work to say, okay, here's 7 different things that ladder up to satisfaction. Because with telco, I mean, I could probably ask, 100 people on this call, and 90 people will say they hate their telco providers, their internet providers, more than likely.
Satisfaction to them a lot of times is not hearing from them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that makes it rough, because if you don't hear from us, then you're not reminded that we're investing billions of dollars a year in the infrastructure of your network. You are on most of the time, but we hear from customers. Internet is like breathing, because now Wi-Fi, you don't hear the AOL buzz anymore. Like, you don't have that tactical feeling that you're online. Everything's just in the air. And
I don't even have to plug anything in anywhere. Yeah,
exactly. And so you take, I think, I do, and I think people take it for granted. So it's like, people explained it, it's like breathing. If you're out, if your internet is out, you're breathing fine, 12 months and 20 days out of the year, but those 5 or 10 days that you had 30-minute outages will ruin your year. And so we have an uphill battle with satisfaction. So that's one of the things we keep track of. And we've developed that as a proxy with our insights team. So if I have a new idea or concept that we're testing, we have developed our insights team, against super smart. They were able to develop a proxy that says how an opinion of Cox translates into a potential driver of customer satisfaction. And so that's one of the kind of lagging indicators that we use throughout the process. Even though I may not see it because the product may never go to market, that's something that I'm always thinking about.
Yep. And that makes me, this isn't something we talked about before, so feel free to not tackle this one as directly, but one of the challenges I think with telecom is you don't have too many opportunities to wow your customers.
Exactly.
If you do what you're supposed to do, is like cool, and that, like, so how do you find ways to create those kind of experiences that actually increase someone's satisfaction? Because you can't just keep the Wi-Fi on and see satisfaction going up.
Not at all. And so it's so interesting. The one of the things I love about this job and brand in general is that you deal with customers because they're humans. And it was funny because I put this out on my social networks just to try and see if anybody could join that I knew and just build some excitement around it. One of my friends from a long time ago, he said, humans will human. And I just laughed at that, because it's like, consumers are so irrational. And so like to your point, we work hard to develop, say, one product, and spend, who knows, 3 months to a year to longer to develop this one product, that we have to really be intentional to think about that the customer may not experience us solving that pain point but once a year. And so if they call us once a year, like pricing is a good example. If pricing is a huge pain point with telco, if a customer only calls us once a year because our service is perfect 365 days that year, we have no problems, we're again investing literally billions of dollars a year in keeping that infrastructure strong and keep internet going, but they have to call that one day to renegotiate their price, which everybody is familiar with, that puts a bad taste in that customer's mouth. And so that's why that is a big problem that we're trying to solve.
Did you say I can renegotiate my price?
I know, right? Exactly. And so that's part of it, right? That's part of the process. Like, it's the cat and mouse game. It's like, okay, we joke around that people put calendar alerts in their phones because they know that, this day they have to call to renegotiate, quote unquote, to get back on a promo price. Well, what if we got rid of promo pricing? What would that do? Well, say we did get rid of promo pricing. It may take, say, a customer called on 7/26 and we stopped doing promo prices 7/27. That customer may not realize that until a year from now. And even then they may feel skeptical. It may take 2 years for them to give us that value or that credit for what we just developed. So to your point, it's something we think about all the time. And so like one project I'm working on is more experience based. And it's not about, very key, is not about one idea. And when we talk to the executives, we make sure they understand this is not about getting approval for one idea. This is about a portfolio of ideas that solve different pain points that are all related, but they're all at different journeys, different points of the journey. So like one is maybe a service related idea where we help solve a pain point. Can't tell you, but I'll say we solve a pain point within the customer. If they have a problem and we have to send a tech out to your home, well, that may happen once a year, once every 3 years. So we built a journey map to say, okay, well, that problem, that move, so to speak, that idea solves the pain point at this point of the journey. This one solves it at 6 months. This one solves it at a year and a half. And then after 3 years time, here's our like NPV of like what we can expect on our ROI to say this is now a successful portfolio of ideas that has now changed our business. So
Yep.
that's part of the fun part is like the puzzle pieces. It's some of them are about really quick ideas, like, hey, here's how we can just do a revenue generating idea to help increase your upward load speeds. Here's another one that can be a much broader, like solving for overall satisfaction.
Yep. No, and we've had talked a lot about process and a lot of kind of hypothetical. If you can you share an example of a project that you're proud of where this process has gone really well?
Yeah, I think I can solve. Yeah, I mentioned earlier about the privacy and security, and again, we did not actually go to market yet with that. We're still developing, but I will say, like, one of the things I'm proud of is that we had a couple different projects we were working on for the past. We have been working on for about 12 months, differently, parallel paths and whatnot. We took a step back and said, you know what, with everything going on, everything changing, let's look at the current macroeconomic influences. Let's look at post-pandemic attitudes and behaviors that may have changed our customer mindset. And then how can we help reduce friction and inject value is what we talk about, injecting value in our customers' lives. And so we took a step back and we felt like we already knew that, but we're doing 3 or 4 different work streams. Let's see what's changed in the past couple of years. We found themes like people are feeling, I'll say we work with different partners, different research partners, and we pulled together a lot of resources to take that broader view of just their lives. We saw people were feeling anxiety, uncertainty, unfamiliarity, they're vulnerable. And so with that, we found people were willing to make trade-offs, like maybe downgrading their internet tier, maybe getting rid of, accelerating their cutting of their cable, looking for discounts, concerned with personal safety and wellness, which is how we directly install, sometimes go to people's houses. Like, how do we attack that? Mm-hmm. Which then took us to kind of distill those impactful moments that people are having, and then take a step back again, go to foundational level, aggregate everything we've been working on, connect those back to those insights. Like, how do we help people with pricing, predictability? So again, we talk about people calling once a year saying, I don't know, like, why do I have to pay more than a new customer? That's uncertainty. They don't like that. It's just so many things else. There's so many other things they have to worry about. How can we help them with that? How can we keep good intent so they can trust us more? How can we adjust our tone to be more forgiving and understanding with our communications, be what we call a force of positivity?
Man, it sounds like marriage advice all over again.
That's right. That's right. And when I was doing the design thinking training at that Harvard class, they one of the exercises we had to do was redesign our entire refrigerator. So the takeaway point was that design thinking can help with every aspect of your life. To your point, marriage, to how you attack your day. And so again, we had to basically redesign how our layout was inside of our refrigerator. It was pretty fun.
Funny. And I'm also realizing that being a husband is a little bit like being a telecom provider, that you don't have too many expectations, or the bar is pretty high. So I need to make sure I'm finding those impactful opportunities where I can make good impressions. Because turn this into a question: how do you prepare for anniversaries?
Oh goodness, I'm fortunate. Our anniversary is a memorable day, and so it is getting harder. 7 years we've been married now. I see it every year. It gets harder and harder. Fortunately, right. Bar goes higher. Fortunately, I take pride that I'm a super creative person. I have a background of like painting, oil painting, and I've always been very artistic, and so for good and for bad, I think very differently than most people, and so I almost using design thinking. I think, I'd mind map something, like, hey, what would be fun this year? Mind map it, like, okay, this would be kind of fun. This would be fun. Oh, okay. That type of thing.
Yep. And that helps you be yourself too, I think, rather than just, booking her favorite restaurant every year. There's a surprise factor in that too.
That's so right. So true.
Yep. Awesome. Jeff, this has been great. I have a few more questions here, but I want to make sure people can share questions from the audience. Or Carrie, are we out of time?
We've got about 2 minutes, but I can let you wrap up your cues.
2 minutes. Okay, maybe one from the audience, if we have any.
Sorry, I'm long-winded.
No, all good. You were great, Jeff. Cool. I don't see anything coming in. So yeah, thank you so much for your time here. I've done a lot of these, and this was one that I took away a lot that I can use both professionally and personally here. So thanks so much for the time, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Now Jeff's a hugger and I'm a hugger. So Casey, I think we have to figure out some kind of like virtual group hug on the call here.
Whoever cracks that one, that's the metaverse I want to be a part of.
All right. So we have a problem statement. So let's start working on that.
There we go.
Yep.
Thank you both so much.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we're going to bring our next speaker up, Kate Hewitt, who is the Chief Customer Officer of Bombas, and Magith Nahukum, the customer engagement evangelist from Braze. I have to talk with my hands. Welcome to you both, and virtual hugs. We'll just keep going with the day, and we'll just make this the hug seminar, the hug sessions.
Yeah, virtual hugs. I think that's the new thing, Carrie. Thank you for the introduction, and very excited to be here. So is that all right, Carrie, if we kick off the session now?
Yeah, just take it away. I'll sneak off until I have to pull you down later.
All right, fantastic. All right, hi everyone. My name is Majid Nuhugan. I'm the evangelist at Braze, meaning I represent our company globally. I'm regularly speaking at conferences and events, educating consumers about what brilliant customer engagement looks like and what you need to create that excellence with your customers. And as I mentioned, I'm into customer engagement. Braze is a customer engagement platform, and our vision is to forge human connections between consumers and their brands they love through relevant and memorable customer experiences. With that, I'm very excited to welcome my guest today, Kate Hewitt, Chief Marketing Officer at Bombas. Kate, welcome to the show. Could you please?
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Could you please say a few words about yourself and your role at Bombas, please?
Yeah, so my name's Kate Hewitt. I've been with Bombas about 8 years. And in my role as Chief Customer Officer, I oversee acquisition marketing, retention marketing, our site experience, our customer support, our consumer insights, as well as our data and analytics teams.
Yeah, fantastic. Kate, as I was, browsing through your Bombas website, I couldn't stop thinking about the mission that you have at your company. One purchase to one donated. I would love to hear more about that. I'm sure the audience would too. So could you please say a few words about that too?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bombas is a company that was founded because of a quote that one of our founders saw on Facebook, that socks were the #1 most requested clothing item in homeless shelters, and it was around the time Tums was getting big. And so they thought, maybe this shortage of socks in shelters could be solved through something like the Tums model. And so that's really where we started. That's been baked in to the DNA of the company from day one. And as we've done product expansion, we've launched in the last few years underwear, which is the #2 most requested clothing item in homeless shelters, and t-shirts, which is the #3 most requested clothing item in homeless shelters. That's continued to be at the core of what we do. Something most folks don't realize about that one-for-one model is that we actually custom design those donation products. We work with our giving partners to understand what the needs of the community that they serve are. And so you'll notice that if you see our donation product, it's generally a bit thicker. So it's our normal product is very durable, it's very high quality, but that's even more true for the donation product. It's typically in darker colors that don't show dirt, because often folks in the communities we serve don't have easy access to laundry. So all of the thoughtfulness from the design perspective that goes into designing for our paying customers goes into the items that we donate as well. And I'm incredibly proud to say that, in the 8 years I've been with Bombas, we've donated more than 75 million items to giving partners all over the country. We have more than 3,500 of them.
Oh, wow, it's more than 75 million donated. And what a great thought process in designing, what you do and then how it is helping the community out there as well. Thank you again, for sharing that insights to the audience. And Kate, for the rest of the time that we have, I would love to divide the conversation into 4 different areas. First, I would love to talk a little bit about the customer experience, right? How are you elevating customer experiences? And then I would love to touch on customer engagement. You also talked about you are responsible for acquisition marketing, retention marketing, so we can dive into that. And then we can also talk about the innovation and the future of retail. In innovation, we can talk about the technologies that you are excited about, the trend and the opportunities, what lies ahead. With that, talking about elevating customer experiences, Kate, the first thought that comes to my mind is that I sincerely believe that consumer behavior and expectations regularly change, right? Whether there is a pandemic or not. So this is relative for all the industries out there, and it's up to the brands how you are keeping up with that change to create that experiences that they deserve, right? So the question that I want to ask you is, how have you dealt with the changing consumer behavior and preferences for your consumers over the past few years?
Yeah. So I think I'm going to answer that question a little bit by what has and what hasn't changed, because I think there's a Jeff Bezos quote around customers are always going to want lower prices, more selection, and faster shipping. And I think for us, interpreting that for our DNA, we're really focused on offering high quality product, and we want to attract consumers that really value that quality. And mission, there is a change in consumer preference for more spending dollars with more mission-oriented companies, and I would say that's a trend we're seeing more people operate that way. But Bombas has been around 8 years, and it was true 8 years ago. I think it will hopefully still be true in the future. It's a trend, but it seems like a much sort of longer standing trend, and so we're really focused on, for the things that we think are static, or that sort of consumers will always value, we're focused on continuing to deliver excellence in those areas. I'd say probably the biggest thing, at least from my vantage point, the two biggest things are just probably the continued dominance of mobile. Just again, a very long-standing, decade plus long trend, but that's still continuing, and we design everything completely mobile first at this point, and have actually for quite some time. And I think the other thing that we're really focused on is how are people consuming content differently. Acquisition marketing in particular is a really pretty major driver for our business, and so being really on top of where are consumers spending time, and are we showing up in those places? Some are harder, some are harder places to show up, particularly in an ROI positive way. But even if we can't yet be there in sort of the scale or with the efficiency that we want to, we always are keeping an eye on where consumers are spending time, and also how they are preferring to consume content. Obviously the TikTok short form video has really changed what customers are watching in the last couple of years.
Yeah, fantastic, Kate. I was making notes as you were speaking. Dominance on mobile, of course, and then also the way that consumers consume content has changed over the last several years. I couldn't stop thinking about how in the world and in the past, several years ago, email was the only way that brands could engage consumers digitally, right? But that has changed as well. We have evolution of devices, right? Smartphones, smartwatches, tablets, PCs, and also the channels on the other side that has been evolving as well, right? So the question as a brand, like you talked about, meeting consumers where they want. And I also believe, Kate, that platforms and channels and devices will keep on evolving in the future as well, whether it's short form TikTok videos or whatever that is. And then I really liked it how you started the conversation about Jeff Bezos' quote about what doesn't change, right? Consumers are not going to come and tell you, hey, you know what, we love your product, but you know what, we are happy to pay for shipping, right? Nobody's going to say that. Right? People love free shipping, and that trend and the quality of the product that doesn't change as well. So okay, now let's jump into the customer engagement side, right? So to start with activation side, in what way is Bombas working to stand out in the eye of the consumer, and what are you currently doing in terms of your e-commerce strategies?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier the mission and product and great quality product are big value props. That mission piece, we believe, does really set us apart. There's a growing number of companies who have a mission that is very central to what they do. Patagonia, I would say, is probably like the gold standard in that area. But we really make mission a part of everything we do, from like our interviewing and hiring process to our onboarding process internally. It's highlighted very heavily in both our acquisition and retention marketing efforts. We have content, on our site related to the mission. We launched at one point a giving, we have a giving directory on our site where you can actually go plug in your zip code and a radius and see who are the Bombas, giving partners near me. And it, notes whether they're accepting other forms of donations or whether they're sort of actively looking for volunteers. So we really look to raise awareness about the mission and also help people get engaged related to that. So that's probably that's huge. And the second is really trying to communicate the quality improvement. I think before I tried Bombas, I didn't know that socks could truly be amazing. And that's something we hear, from a lot of our customers, that they didn't realize how much better socks could be than what they had experienced to date. And so we focus obviously on delivering great quality product, but as we think about all of the places we're talking to customers on the acquisition front, we're talking about specific features that are major upgrades, like for example, our seamless toe, which removes the friction that you would get from a seam in a sock. On the retention side, we continue to reinforce that message. And then we focus quite a lot on customer support, which we call customer happiness. So we have what's called the 100% happiness guarantee, which is basically, if you're not happy with the product for any reason, you can contact our team and we will replace it, refund it, sort of do what it takes to make sure that you're happy with your experience. And so I think mission and product, high quality product, are really the two threads that go through every single thing we do. And I think, our hope is the consistency with which we deliver on both of those is what sets us apart.
Yeah, fantastic. You touched upon raising awareness, right? I mean, in the world today, that consumers tend to associate themselves with brands which believes in something, right? So that could be, for example, I would associate myself with a brand that believes in sustainability, right? And as a brand, I believe it is their responsibility to make me aware of their mission and their vision, right? And I tend to move on the longer part of the journey and be loyal to that brand. And Kate, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because oftentimes one of the mistakes that brands do is that they have fantastic vision, but they fail to communicate that to their consumers, right? And now we are moving towards more and more, having a life that is purposeful for us and also the environment around us. So we need clearly raise awareness as a brand going forward, and then consistency, of course, which is a great point. To do brilliant customer engagement, you need to consistently build great products and also consistently communicate well enough and to create excellence. And Kate, you touched upon quality of product a bit here and there. Of course, quality of product along with quality of engagement is key to retain the customers. So the question is, how important is the D2C element for your audience engagement and for your overall success?
So we were a digitally native company. We started entirely in e-commerce, and that remains today the vast majority of our business. And for our category, it really, we think, is a great model for pretty wide variety of reasons. We do have a small wholesale footprint with a few retailers that we think are really aligned with our core values and customer promise. So we've been quite selective about the partners that we work with to expand that footprint.
Fantastic. I do have like two parts left, the innovation part and the future of retail. So let's start with innovation. Okay, and I'm going to pack two questions in one.
Okay.
You know, what are the different trends or opportunities or technologies that you were excited about? Number one, and number two would be, technology, being an enabler for a lot of brands out there. How is it helping Bombas specifically to solve all the challenges that you have there?
Yeah. So I would say in the 8 years that I've been at Bombas, the central role of not just technology, but data, I think it's gotten more and more critical. And when I think about the evolution of my team, I mentioned the data and analytics team as in my organization, but almost 10% of my team is in a part of the team called data platform, which is basically all about how are we ingesting modeling data and making it available for internal use. And so that, I think that just speaks to quite how central that is to our business. I would say at the moment, the two areas we're probably most focused from a data and technology perspective are really upgrading our product data. So really expanding the number of attributes that we're able to look at and have available for use through different, pulling it one through more of the customer experience, but also improving our own ability to understand differences in how products are performing, how customers are experiencing them with quite a lot more granularity. And then the second major data initiative is around customer data, and in particular first-party customer data, given the evolving consumer privacy landscape.
Yeah, definitely. I'm when you talk about data, of course, the past few months, every retailer, every brand out there was screaming about, the death of the cookies, right? And there are regulations keeps on coming from the government, from companies like Apple and Google over and over again. In 2018, everybody are freaking out about GDPR, right? And then, you keep on suggesting, there is zero-party data, there is first-party data. Give importance to that, so that you really don't have to worry about changing regulations that comes from the government, and also the regulations, of course. For a company like yours and many companies out there, getting the preferences of the users from the very beginning of the customer onboarding journey is really key, right? So even for retail, right? What color socks would you like, right? I mean, do you prefer pink or blue? And then consumers are happy to give that to you, right? Because they want to get the right product recommendations. And that's why, we all have this way of getting this data in, so that companies can provide relevant recommendations and move on in a very exceptional way in the customer journey of your consumers. And, just one more question on that data piece. If you can share with the audience today about any of the personalized recommendations that you do through first-party data, just on a high level.
I think I'm trying to think of the best example. I would say we're a bit earlier in this journey, to be honest. So we're not yet in the realm of sort of deep personalization. We're in sort of the gray area, I would say, between segmentation and personalization. But it's something that we've really seen improve as we've sort of moved in that direction. We have seen definitely improvements in response rate of customers to what we are showing them, and also probably as critically, especially coming from praise, reducing unsubscribe rates, or reducing kind of the number of people that are saying, kind of this isn't relevant to me in a more active way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you've talked about the unsubscriber way, and also, because of the mission that you talked about in the beginning, one of the examples that, oftentimes marketers, we are so much into getting opt-ins, right? We don't think about opt-outs. And one of the brand campaigns that I really, really like is that one of the flower delivery brands here in the UK. So what they have done during the Mother's Day, not for everyone that's not an occasion to celebrate. So they gave their consumers the opportunity to opt out so they don't receive any communications on Mother's Day, right? And it was one of the thoughtful marketing movements, I believe, that has ever happened.
Yes.
And I see, Kate, a lot of brands are like adopting that strategy now for Father's Day.
Yes.
And so it's something that I think, we all should be like considerate of, right?
Yes.
So we engage with our consumers. Even in the previous session, we heard, consumers are human, right? So I think we should move towards that arena as well, so that we all can stay human as well. Okay. Kate, I have one more topic to talk to you about, which is the future of retail, right? What are you excited about the future of retail, and how should you think brands should be prepared?
I'm excited about. So, I mean, something that drew me to the D2C model specifically was the ability to really own the entire customer experience and to be able to use real-time feedback and data, as we've just talked about, to improve the products we're offering, to improve our relationships with customers, and to really sort of be with the customer kind of the whole way through their journey with us. And I think that is something that, even with the evolving privacy landscape, or actually potentially accelerated even by the changing privacy landscape, I think that the folks that do opt in, I think, are going to be like, that's quite powerful, right? It's kind of a different level of engagement with the brand, and so I'm pretty excited about that flywheel sort of continuing to move.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, D2C explosion, right? So there are so many opportunities for brands out there to create that a relationship with their consumers directly, right? And also understanding their consumers' needs and wants, and also as and when they understand more, your consumers are the one who can give direct feedback about your products. Number one, they can give feedback about how you are engaging, and this would also be an opportunity for brands to directly test and experiment and also gamify the experiences, so that as a brand, they are elevating the customer experiences on a full front. Kate, we talked quite a lot today about from the beginning, changing consumer behavior and preferences. We talked about elevating customer experiences. We also talked about customer engagement on the activation side. We also talked about the retention piece. We touched upon innovation and also the future of retail. With that, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today, Kate, and thank you for sharing all those insights as well. Thanks for joining us. And I do see that if there are any questions from the audience, I believe that we do have time to take one or two. Carrie, if you are there, I want to hand it back over to you as well.
Oops. I am here, but apparently I had my camera covered. Sorry about that. It looks like nothing in the Q&A, but if you had any wrap-up questions, we can take those too.
Yeah, I believe that's all the questions that we have. So if there are no questions, I believe there is one question that just came from the audience. Kate, it's from Jack. Are you looking into behavioral data? Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I'm gonna just assume that you're talking about behavioral data from third-party vendors, and the answer is not currently. It's something we've talked about. Our general understanding is that it's quite expensive, and what we have seen, at least on the acquisition side of things, and we're not sure yet if this translates, is that generally when we've paid for sort of better target, what should theoretically be better targeting, that we've not actually seen the uptick that we need in response rates to sort of pay for quite how expensive that data is. So currently not something that we use if you're talking about external third-party behavioral data.
And I believe it's just a follow-up comment from Jack again. He says translating first-party data on site. I believe it's just a comment.
Yeah, I see that. So we do I would say right now, we mostly incorporate behavioral data through our CRM approach, as well as through any paid retention marketing that we do there. We pull in quite a lot of behavioral data. On site, we do some, but it's definitely an area that we plan to do quite a lot more in the coming months and years.
All right, fantastic. We don't
and Kate, sorry. I was just gonna have to say, personally, my sister-in-law used to work for a shelter that actually received Bombas socks regularly. And you really did see the folks come in and they were so appreciative, and sometimes they, be rocking 2 pair because in Wisconsin it gets a little cold here in the winter. So yeah, really seeing, because like the family would help out and stuff, and is really, really cool to see that in person firsthand, just to see that come to fruition on both ends.
Yeah, that's, I've seen it myself, but I always love hearing it from others. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh yeah, I was like, oh, Bombas, I gotta tell her. As of course, every summit I MC on, I have to make them all about me just for a little bit here and there.
Love it, thank you.
And also Jack says thanks and love Bombas. So that's I believe that.
Thanks, Jack.
And then we're actually a little early ending, so we're gonna just take a quick TV timeout, and we'll be back with our next session at 2 Eastern.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
All right, we are back. Thanks everyone for the TV time out there. Want to bring up to the stage our next group of speakers. We have Mike Wen, the VP of Creative Marketing Group at Verizon, and our moderator, Stephen Whiteside, the managing editor of Reports and News at WARC. How's it going, guys?
Hello, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm good, Carrie. Thanks for the introduction. Hey, Steve.
All right, I'm going to sneak off and let you two take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Carrie. Really appreciate it. And thanks, Mike, as well. So, a very brief introduction. So I'm Steve Whiteside. I'm the managing editor of news and reporting at WARC. As has been teed up, Mike Wenty is joining me today from Verizon, where he is VP of the Creative Marketing Group. And over the next 40 minutes or so, we'll hope to have a broad-ranging discussion that covers many aspects of marketing innovation, and obviously give us your questions too, if you have any as we go along, and we'll try and get to as many of those as we can. So to get started, Mike, I was hoping maybe you could just give us a little bit of background about your career to date, as you've had quite a diverse journey to Verizon, and tell us a bit more about your current role too.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I previously, before joining Verizon, I was on the agency side, working in a variety of creative leadership roles in agencies, from digital media to full service, my whole career. Joined Verizon about 2 years ago, really to bring a creative lens and perspective to how we approach marketing, how we look at the creative product ultimately that we're producing, as well as stewarding the in-house agency and really looking at how the brand manifests across all the channels. But that's a little bit of my journey, and 2 years, joined during the pandemic. It's been quite a journey, and it's been an amazing learning experience, but also really rewarding opportunity to kind of be a creative on this side, and really the intimacy that comes with being within a brand.
That's great. I think we'll come back to various bits of that as we go along, particularly live on brand side and agency side, which I think is always interesting. But to start with, maybe just to frame us up, do you have a sort of personal philosophy of marketing innovation when you think about how you implement that at Verizon, and maybe more generally throughout your career? Are there any sort of guidelines or principles or anything like that that you've adhered to that have served you well?
Yeah, I think when it comes to marketing innovation, I think there's one aspect of that which is very much around marketing transformation and how to maybe communicate, reach customers, be able to leverage technology and tools to be able to do it more efficiently and maybe more effectively. And you kind of immediately think of things like RTM, leverage of DCO, or kind of reinventing, getting more D2C or your e-commerce function, and which I think those are all incredibly important. When I think about marketing innovation, I kind of lean more towards what are new concepts and approaches to be able to tell your story as a brand, or to be able to market a service or product to reach them, not necessarily just purely from an efficiency perspective, but more from a almost a creative innovation perspective, and how you can show up and market as a brand a little bit differently than maybe more traditional methods. So those are kind of the two sides that I see as far as when you come in. So as we think of marketing innovation, I immediately kind of go to how do we start to communicate something like the benefit of the network, which you typically have to tell somebody about, but how can we maybe demonstrate that in a different way for customers to tangibly feel it? And so it leans more into a kind of what I talk about as like story doing versus storytelling.
And do you think it's harder as somebody who's interested in innovation to sell in that creative innovation? I think we can often get a little bit obsessed as an industry with the tech and the efficiency and all that sort of thing. But do you think it's a harder sell getting those more creative innovations activated and on their feet?
Yeah, I think it can be difficult. I think sometimes, especially when you're asking, I think, any brand to look at doing something in a new way, because especially if there's been great success in the way that it's been kind of approaching. And so I think it just becomes, how do you approach it? Where do you apply, I think, the innovation, and also just new ways of working or new ideas that you want to put into the market, and also just maybe lower some of the some of the risk that comes to like all the eggs are in that one basket, and we're going to go all in instead of how do you kind of breadcrumb or kind of dip your toe into it to kind of make it as part of the entire mix of things that you're doing, and also treat it as something that you're learning from. So then next time around, whether it's an amazing success or maybe it isn't, you learn from it to where you can, bring it to the next time around when you look at a campaign, promotion, or communication you're trying to put out, that maybe it's not the 5% of the mix anymore. Maybe it gets more into like the 20 or 30%. And then if that works well, then it gets more into the bulk of it. So how do you kind of use it to learn and grow? Otherwise, I do believe you kind of run the risk of becoming static and, comfortable and not, bringing that kind of challenger mindset to look at new ways of doing things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's quite a good segue as well into my next question, which is thinking about how does marketing innovation work at Verizon itself? Is there a team that's sort of charged with marketing innovation, or is it a company-wide imperative to do that, or is it sort of a mix of different things?
As you can imagine, Verizon is not a small company, so there's I think there's there's an expectation and desire for, I think, each group to bring an aspect of innovation and exploring new ways to communicate or new tools to leverage. I think also it helps to have a specific kind of group within, the company around marketing effectiveness and transformation that is looking at how to leverage those tools and to drive more effectiveness and efficiency. Specifically within my team that sits within the creative marketing group, it helps to have, as you look at the specific channels. So when I get into retail, for example, there's a portion of that team that is always going to be looking at innovation in regards to like how to think about that channel. Same thing when it comes to digital or social, but then there's also more of our integrated teams to where we're looking for innovative opportunities as far as how we can kind of communicate. So it's a kind of a longer way to say yes, and you want it to be, part of the expectation with the day-to-day working teams that is working on a specific project, because they know what you're trying to communicate and ideally know those opportunities to be able to look at kind of trying something new. But I think you also need to bring, some of the, the change agents, if you will, or the, people to, be more provocative and saying like, what if we just kind of completely flip it on its head and try this instead? And it really, I think the magic comes into like how those groups all work together.
It's obviously been a pretty wild couple of years, as you mentioned at the top. So have you learned anything across those groups during COVID in particular, when sort of innovation became a must for everybody, when you had to completely rethink old ways of doing things? Is there anything that maybe has stuck with you from that period, or any campaigns that you were especially proud of?
I think over that period, it kind of dispelled a lot of myths that it's very difficult to like change just ways of working, which I think also in just ways of producing, the ways of communicating. So I think it definitely has opened up more of the aperture of let's try new things. Like we can learn from it, and we can kind of grow and achieve the same results, but maybe even better. And I think that just becomes more about how we're working. Look, I'm doing this call from my home today versus in the office. But I think when it comes to the work itself, I think that mindset has bled over into that too, and the creative product that we make. I think the thing that we've gotten, very adept at is how to pivot and how to adapt as new challenges come up. Obviously, the pandemic was a major one for all of us, but I think we run into these all the time when it comes into what's happening in the market, what's happening with a competitor or a new product or something even kind of culturally that's going on that kind of requires you to be comfortable kind of shifting from maybe a game plan that's been in development for months or even years, and how to be able to kind of make that happen. One piece that I'm really kind of extremely proud of is this project we did with the Met Unframed, and it was initially a very specific kind of execution, definitely much more experiential in nature, And then, the challenges that presented it allowed it to take a new direction, but also just conceptually and creatively and executionally become so much more effective, and I think beautiful in how it came to life. And ultimately around how do we, the challenge for us is constantly how do we dimensionalize the benefit of a network, something that's invisible, kind of intangible. Unless you're on it, you really can't, kind of feel the difference and see that it is a platform for creativity and innovation. So we're always looking for those opportunities to be able to demonstrate that. So this project that we did with the Met called the Met Unframed, was how can we take something that is in a physical environment and bring it to those that are at home, that haven't been able to go to a museum, and also just to look at, the benefits of, a network that has high performance, low lag, and being able to transform yourself to the Met, but also bring the Met maybe to your living room.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of a video to watch for that one, so it'll stretch the limits of my technical capability, but I'll try and share it with you now. So hopefully we can watch that, and then yeah, it'd be nice to talk a little bit more about the strategy behind it. So so here we go.
There's a new experience at the Met, which sounds pretty cool. The Met and Verizon launched the Met Unframed. You can explore the digital galleries and play games that unlock augmented reality versions of some of the museum's most famous works.
I love what you've done to the museum to make it accessible. This gives the average person a chance to get a good poke around the Met without going anywhere.
Yeah, that was a really compelling piece of work, and maybe unusual for a brand like Verizon to insert itself in that space. Was it an especially complicated campaign to sort of get from start to finish, or was it one of those that it all kind of fell together quite easily for you?
I think when you're trying something new, it's you're always going to run into those, like, how do we bring others along? How do we maybe get comfortable in space to where we don't know necessarily what the final outcome is going to be? I mean, we had a good idea that there would be a lot of attention and desire to participate. Also, just I think the museum space is kind of speaking of marketing innovation, it hasn't really evolved in that kind of customer experience or people just visiting a museum. So we knew there would be a big strong desire for it. But I think learning along the way and bringing others as you start to test it and you start to see how it comes to life, and then once it starts to feel tangible, then it becomes rather not easy, but you start to get more of a snowball effect as far as getting into execution. And we've launched that at CES, where our CEO Hans was doing the keynote presentation, along with a lot of other kind of innovations and projects we were working on too. So it had a great platform.
Never hurts when the CEO gets involved with that sort of thing. So that's always quite helpful too. But no, that's a really great piece of work. And when you're measuring innovative campaigns like that, do you use similar metrics that you would use for sort of the more bread and butter stuff you do, or are you thinking slightly differently about what success looks like when you're trying something new?
I think when it comes to elements like brand lift, what was the after somebody experienced it, what was their perception of our network versus before? I think those things all still hold true, and I think it's important to be able to have some baseline continuity from how you measure other work that you do. But there is some stuff that becomes relatively difficult when you get into new kinds of work that is new medium that you can't measure exactly the same way. Like this one, for instance, had a significant amount of earned media that was applied to it that maybe you typically wouldn't have had with a more direct promotionally led, program. So you have to kind of factor that in as far as a KPI. Is that something we were expecting? Yes, that was the goal, to be able to get a fair amount of of that kind of brand love that was coming with it, but without being able to see the tangible benefit or attribution to 5G, then it would have just been a art piece. And so I think that's critical as we look into space like this. How do you make it relevant for the brand and what you ultimately want to get out of it? Sometimes that might be, we're looking for a different way to be able to communicate and engage. And all right, what do you learn from that to be able to kind of apply, kind of moving forward? I think for us, being able to see a fair amount of, I go back to story doing or magnetic kind of marketing that people are drawn to be able to communicate a product benefit or service, like our network in this instance, had a stickiness with it that, was really, really effective. And also, something we want to continue to explore.
We touched at the top of the interview a bit about your agency background and having switched over from agency side to brand side. What do you think some of the big differences are in that area when it comes to marketing innovation? Now you're actually working for a client rather than at an agency.
Maybe I'll be a little broader here than just purely innovation, but hopefully I'll bring it back full circle. I think a lot of what I was really drawn in coming to work at Verizon specifically was the opportunity to be able to look at this kind of work. And I think on the agency side, you have tremendous perspective from your vantage point in kind of working on a piece of business, but it kind of lacks the intimacy and the business knowledge that comes with it. And so, my desire in coming over and what I was excited about was, not just kind of having what the business and the brand was needing to do or needed to communicate in a brief, but being up to it, all the way to my neck in like what it is that we want to communicate, what is the challenges that we have, and knowing every aspect of the brand. As a creative, when I'm always like extremely interested when it gets to how does that brand show up from the receipt you get when you purchase something all the way to like the Super Bowl and everything in between, because I find if you kind of keep that focus and attention across that entire experience, but also how the brand shows up, like all boats rise, including opportunities for innovation. And so I also believed when you're in-house, when you're within a brand, you can find those other like-minded individuals that are looking for areas to experiment, also to be able to try something new and do something that sometimes defy convention. Whereas I think if you're externally, that it needs to be a specific kind of brief or ask, or you're kind of challenging something from a different point of view. It's not to say either one is maybe better than the other. I've just done the former a lot. So I think it was just an interesting standpoint to be able to come internally. The other thing, just for me personally, as a creative coming into this world, it's what I do love is the intimacy that comes with it, but there's also this aspect of accountability that comes with it too, that I think externally you could work on one piece of business and then you're going to go sell gum the next day or shoes the other. And I think have that accountability to where the decisions of what you're trying to make need to be really grounded in what is the business trying to do, and also knowing like you got to wake up with it tomorrow. And I think that's a responsibility factor that I enjoy, and but it's not for everyone too. So.
And as somebody who's got that agency expertise, what role do your agencies play, and maybe your media partners and things like that, in helping you innovate? How do you look to them to help you there?
Yeah, I think our agency ecosystem, all of our partners are extremely important to bring that outside in perspective. I think admittedly there's some cases where as any brand, you can kind of get very focused on what your goals and priorities are, your world. And I think needing, that someone to come in and always challenge, like, well, what if you think of it this way, or take learnings from maybe another brand or piece of business that they've tried something that could be applicable to a challenge that you have. And so I think that that perspective is tremendous. And, and I think it's, I think it's also just like a, responsibility to have as a partner and working on something, not just to take only the brief or the execution that you're being asked for, and being able to look at, well, what if, and I think, having a good relationship and, having some familiarity with what the challenges are important to be able to bring that. So it's, it's appropriate, but perspective and, kind of looking at different ways to be able to do stuff is, imperative. So yes, give me some of that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Do you think your agency experience has helped you be maybe a better client? I know that a lot of agency folks are often find themselves getting very frustrated. So do you think the fact you've worked on both sides of the aisle has sort of helped you be a good client to your agencies?
I work with a big marketing department that has a lot of those relationships. It's not like everything, that I'm involved heavily on many of those, but I guess the short answer is I would hope so. And I believe so. I think understanding, as a former creative, what did I need to know in a brief, and how much, especially in trying to steward a creative idea to its execution, but also, being able to kind of have, a certain, taxonomy and shorthand when it comes to some of the work that you're wanting to be able to bring to life, or even, reference out in the world in the industry. I think it does help. In many cases, being able to have that connection point or relationship can help maybe unstick some things that maybe get kind of stuck, and I think that naturally happens depending on, what the brief is or the challenge, or if things need to change, or depending on how many people are in there. It's a long answer of saying, I believe so, yes.
A long answer, but a good answer. So that's good. Yeah, I want to go back to another campaign of yours, the 9/12 campaign, which I think is a really, really very moving and very powerful piece of work. So again, I will try and share it so we can watch video for that, and then I think it would be really good to hear more from you about sort of some of the thinking behind the campaign, how you landed on it as an idea, and again, this sort of story doing idea, which I think it's a really powerful example of. So I will just bring that video up now, and then hopefully we can talk about it. Started a little early there. Hold on. Two things at once is clearly way beyond my capability level. So that's always good to find out about yourself. All right, here we go.
"9/12, the untold story of reconnecting New York. A tribute to the 14,000 Verizon employees who risked their lives restoring service to New York in the days, weeks, and months after 9/11. A live virtual event exclusively for Verizon employees, using the latest form of communication from 2001, texting. With new texts every hour at the times of day they actually happened 20 years ago. This one-day, real-time, immersive MMS experience created a multimedia platform out of existing applications, leveraging every native tool within a text conversation. Using videos, photos, voice memos, WebGL, AR, immersive phone calls, and SMS messages. A story that's never been told in a way that's never been done, honoring the Verizon employees who ran towards a crisis to reconnect New York."
You're doing great on the toggling, Steve.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, no, I definitely feel like I'm not quite as evolved a human being as I thought I was. But yeah, no, it's a really, really fantastic campaign. Could you, tell us a bit about the background, how it sort of came to be, how it sort of was developed? Because I think it's such a powerful piece of work, and certainly maybe not something that people would immediately have leapt to for Verizon, but obviously a really big part of what you guys do.
Yeah, I think I even in building on our previous conversation about, I think, the relationship between being a creative within a brand, and also even our external partners, that whereas sometimes they bring that perspective from the outside in. I think this one is a great example of, that perspective that, really only an internal, organization or creative group could have brought something like that to life. And, it wasn't a brief or here, go make this thing. I think the amount of kind of sensitivity around a subject like that and how to bring it to life, I think would have been very difficult if I was back in my agency days and I was external trying to be able to produce something like that. The history behind it too is, my main office that we come into in our, headquarters in, downtown Manhattan, right at 140 West Street, which is right next door to the towers. You can't help but kind of get a sense for like where you're at and everything that's happened there. And my boss, Andrew McKechnie, who's our CCO, would talk about when they were starting the in-house agency. He was handed a manila envelope, of like all these historical photos of that day, and parts of World Trade that was coming into the building, and just all the workers, and just really almost like an archival kind of history of the day itself, and also not just the building and the area, but also the stories of Verizon employees kind of coming to basically reconnect Lower Manhattan, and then stories came to it where our CEO at the time was on the phone constantly with the president at that time too, and part of it was the impetus of like reconnecting Lower Manhattan was to be able to get Wall Street and stock exchange working, to be able to be a sign that the terrorists didn't win and really go after our capitalism, and knowing that the thousands of Verizon employees that and that's why it was called 9/12, because it was immediately the very next day of springing into action to be able to start working. And as Andrew would share this envelope and start telling about the story, it was just, it's just such a moment of pride, I think, as a Verizon employee, that what the company did, and just the impulse to act, and also just realizing, I'm 2 years in. Think of all the new employees that have started over those last 20 years that maybe don't even know this story, because it's not something that you go out and you try to share broadly. And it's just, coming up on the 20th anniversary, it was like, we have to do something around this. And that's where, the idea when we talk about, marketing innovation, but it's communication innovation of how do we maybe use, one of the most intimate things that we have, like the phone, but also texting, which is even a more intimate, app on that phone that you communicate in, to be able to talk about that day in a very linear storytelling format, using your phone. And we interviewed all former employees. It was, incredibly, just proud campaign to work on and bring to life. But it was really challenging to be like, how do we want to tell this story? And that's where this thought of let's not just do one post or a video, let's do many texts throughout a 12-hour period on one day, the time of day when things happened, everything from, Secret Service calls to, AR experiences, to be able to look around the building and the damage. It was really, as you talk about before, how do you, go execute something like that and bring it to life. And then you add put the added layer of the subject matter that you're dealing with. It makes it even more, rewarding, but also kind of challenging as far as how to navigate that. But that's a little bit of the history around it, and even just we wanted to really pay homage to how we were bringing it to life too, versus I think in a bit more traditional format in the past would have been much easier.
No, it's really a wonderful piece of work. I think one of the interesting link points between that and the campaign with the Met is that there's always risk involved in marketing innovation, whether it's creative innovation or whether it's sort of technological. But how do you sort of build that culture of being brave and being willing to take a risk and sort of taking those big swings sometimes? Because obviously the impact can be great, but it can be difficult to encourage, particularly in large organizations, that kind of appetite for doing something a little braver and a little outside the norm.
Yeah, I think sometimes it can be, you know, paralyzing if you treat it like it's all, meaning it's the you know, it's an all or nothing kind of execution or thing that you're bringing to life. Whereas, you know, in that last piece for 9/12, it was an internal piece. You know, I think and granted, it's 130,000 employees internally, and it's a big group and the subject matter, but also, you know, I think it kind of helps put in perspective maybe some of the risks, whereas there's less of a business risk to that. Whereas I think, you know, on the Met Unframed piece, it was a very small piece in context of a much larger 5G nationwide, you know, campaign that was all being rolled out. So, and that's why I go back to, you know, just being able to, you know, kind of calibrate what it is you're trying to be able to do and put it in perspective, I think kind of lowers and takes some of the pressure off of, you know, what if it doesn't work? And I think embracing, if it doesn't work, we'll learn from it and continue to get better. You know, I'll be honest, like different groups and different kind of, you know, campaigns or what it is that you need to be able to get across are going to be better for it, you know, versus something that maybe has, you know, a lot of, you know, riding on it. So I think it shows that you can always find something to be able to look at as a way to be able to, you know, experiment, but also bring a little bit of innovation, even to like an employee only kind of, you know, piece that goes out.
This is a slightly nebulous question, so apologies in advance, but I'm interested in, when you're approaching innovation, how much of it is kind of reliant on a bit of instinct or gut feel or something similar? Because I think we can often get sort of caught up in process and metrics and these sort of hard indicators of where to go. But is there a role for that sort of, either whether it's experience or just gut feel or something you built up over time that sort of gives you a feel that this might be something that's worth doing or trying?
I think I think gut feel, I think in a little bit, we're talking about subjectivity when it comes to, you know, the creative idea or concept or the expression of that. And is it good? Is it something unique? And will people respond to it? And that's kind of an intangible thing to put your arms around. You can always, you know, did it communicate X, Y, and Z? Is it answering the strategy from that perspective? Is it on brand? You know, is it the right tone, et cetera? But I think that at the end of the day, as far as, you know, is it a concept that people are going to, you know, respond to, and is it unique? I think it is a certain amount of creative perspective that comes from it, and hopefully my days on the agency side has also kind of helped to be able to say, as far as like creative taste, does it live up to the craft that, you know, we want as a premium brand? Is it something that hasn't been done before? Those are some of the factors that, you know, I think experience, but also just taste level contribute to. In regards to innovation, I think it's dangerous in some cases because you can lead with the technology if you're not careful. And there's many times to where, you know, you can be like, hey, I got an AR idea. And it's like, yeah, but that's not an idea, you know, like you're leading with the execution. So I think it's like, how are you grounding it into, you know, what's the business or brand problem or opportunity that you're trying to be able to go and address, and then let the innovation and the execution of that like help support that and be part of that concept, versus I think the other way around is when you're kind of, you know, leading with the execution versus really what is it grounded in the business.
I think you may have slightly answered this question, but I guess the flip side of all that is there's a lot of hype around at the moment around different things, whether it's NFTs or the metaverse or anything like that. So is that the way you also then avoid just jumping on the latest shiny object or the latest bandwagon? Is it that sort of laser focus on the brand and the objectives first, and make sure you're not doing things just for the sake of doing them?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be an innovation conversation if we didn't touch on metaverse or something. I think the allure to say hey, I want to go do an NFT thing can start to sometimes outweigh the why. And I think that's a very good question for any brand or marketer, is to what is this helping do? And what is our right, what do we want to ultimately get out of this, and what do we want it to be able to go and achieve? Now, if for instance, if you want to think about how to reinvent loyalty in something that is different than just an app or an email, and maybe it's through new technology like NFT, great. It allows you those, but you have a specific objective that is kind of leading into what you want to do with it. And I think the metaverse is very similar in the case of what is it that you want to be able to create within that space. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go and experiment and look at ways and places that your brand should show up, but I think be intentional about it is all I'm asking for. So obviously in all those areas, very interested from a Verizon perspective, as you think of the network and blockchain, NFT, et cetera. None of it's possible without the pipe that it's all running on, or the network, if you will. And we believe we have the best network for that. So clearly those are all spaces we're going to want to play, and but we just need to find the right intentional way of being able to do that, versus just we're going to throw up a signpost in metaverse land.
There's a worrying number of those around. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to close our conversation by maybe talking about some areas of innovation that maybe you're particularly excited about at the moment, where you think there are particularly interesting possibilities that may develop in a sort of near to medium term.
I don't have a clean answer for that, but I think I'm really excited about the convergence of physical and virtual worlds, and I think the potential that can start to bring to life for customers, people, experiences, et cetera. And I think we've gotten our full taste of tuning into virtual concerts over the last 2 years. I think though, as physical ones come on, it's more of all right, what is that interrelationship between the two? And not from a concert perspective, but just meaning more in just worlds. As you look at gaming continue to take off, what does this mean for things like AR in real life games everywhere you go through your phone, and just how those things start to converge, I think is going to be really, really exciting, and something that I'm excited to see where it goes. I still go back to our last, just a moment ago, my point on the NFTs and metaverse is just being really intentional about how a brand shows up and what is it trying to achieve. So, but it's definitely more fun.
And are there any of the sort of much hyped technologies around that you think it may be a bit more sizzle than steak? Anything that you're maybe not so tempted by that's out there at the moment?
Not yet. I think it's too early to say which one's the vine of the group or not. But I think everything is viable. I think only time's going to tell which one is going to judge out. But I don't have a firm point of view about which one is maybe a short-lived.
Well, that's us right on our 40 minutes, Mike. So thanks so much for talking today. I really appreciate it. It was great to talk about that with you.
This was awesome,
thank
Steve.
You both.
Thank you.
I still got goosebumps from the 9/12 video. So I'm that was crazy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again both for joining us today. This is actually going to end our day. Thank you to everyone for joining us and tuning in. Big thanks, of course, to our speakers, our sponsors, and everyone in the audience. Don't forget to head over to our Brand Innovators website to learn about all our upcoming events. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up in person and virtual. And of course, it's also time to cast your vote for the Brand Innovators Women in Marketing Industry Innovation Awards. So head to the website, cast your vote, and sign up for some really cool stuff we've got